From the Digital Media Center, on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. I'm your host, John Letts, and this program, Ramping Up Your English, is all about reaching a higher level of English proficiency. And so the target audience for this program is intermediate level English learners. It's really not for beginners because everything we do is in English. That means whatever your language background, this program is designed to help you take that beginning level of English, maybe lower intermediate level, and lift that up to a higher level. And what we do is we use a content-based approach to helping you reach those higher levels. We use thematic units, and today's thematic unit, the one we're in the middle of here, is on Native Americans. So this is episode 106 of Ramping Up Your English. Now, previously, we looked at the effect of the arrival of the English colonists in North America. In this episode now, we see what happens when we have three European powers all here on the North American continent. And what we're looking for here is with all of those powers trying to get advantages and push each other out, how this has affected Native Americans, how they try to make all of this work for their people. Let's learn about this in the following video.
A border is where two different things meet. It can be a very real, visible border, like this wall between the United States and Mexico. It can be an impenetrable wall, a porous region, or even an area of blending. It can be a line on a map, yet not physically in the real world. A border can also be invisible, a line more felt than seen. A border can separate worldviews, customs, taboos, sense of humanity and self-restraint on violence or compassion. A border can be a fixed geographic feature, like a river or an agreed-upon place. Borders can be friendly and open or closed and guarded. Native Americans had thousands of years of experience with borders. How would this experience serve them when Europeans arrived? In the English settlements along the East Coast, borders were always changing. In a short time, European colonists, who were first welcome and given space for their fledgling colonies, began extending the boundaries of their settlements. This pushing out of boundaries was a pushing in on the land needed for the indigenous people to meet their needs. Early boundaries were fortress walls enclosing a tiny space, but they kept moving out as more population came from Europe. Further north, the French established their cities as trading centers, mostly with the acceptance of Native Americans. Most of the French presence was scattered among Native American communities that hosted the traders of beaver pelts. It was incumbent on the traders to learn where the borders between tribes were located, as trading with the tribe's enemy was often seen as hostility and often resulted in confiscation of their trade goods. Yet, across these borders, Native American traders had crossed in peace for millennia. Borders between tribes often changed. The Iroquois were pushed south of the Great Lakes by Algonquian-speaking tribes. They, in turn, expanded their border southward, using firearms supplied by Dutch and English traders, pushing into the land of the Susquehanna and into the Ohio Valley. So Native Americans were no strangers to the concept of borders. Some geographical borders overlapped, areas shared by different peoples, as in hot springs or other spiritual sites. When defeated Pequot leaders traveled to the land of the Iroquois to see if they could join them, they were killed. Yet the Iroquois often accepted captives into their tribe to remain strong. Crossing a border could have unexpected consequences. In the southeast, the border between control by European powers was undefined. By 1700, French traders had fanned out along the Ohio River and other points north of Florida, where the Spanish presence was now supported by some of the same tribes the Spanish had attacked in earlier centuries. French explorer Robert La Salle had finished the exploration started by Marquette and Joliet, following the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. La Salle claimed the whole Mississippi watershed for France. Some native people in the southeast welcomed the French for protection from the slave raiders from English colonies on the Atlantic coast. Although the Gulf Coast was claimed by Spain, Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne de Bienville established a French settlement at Mobile Bay, not far from Spanish Pensacola. Bienville later established New Orleans, which gave France control of the Mississippi River. France now had claim to a huge area of North America, but that claim came without the consent of the people already living there. While some tribes, like the Muskogee and the Shawnee, played the French, Spanish, and English against each other in the deerskin and slave trade, the Cherokee allied themselves mostly with the English. In the far southwest, borders between Europeans and Native Americans were often self-imposed. Missionaries presented Christianity as the only valid religious view, which came with very narrow rules. They saw indigenous people as being in need of saving from their own beliefs and practices. Any regard was dependent on their acceptance of Christian ways. Jesuit missionary Father Kino approached Native Americans in the Southwest in a unique way. He discovered love in his heart for these people and sought to learn from them. Kino opposed taking Indians for slave labor, including deadly work in Spanish mines. This put him in conflict with other missionaries and Spanish officials. Using flexibility and friendship, he accepted the ceremonial dances, polygamy, and ceremonial use of intoxicants. Kino's main tool of conversion was friendship. This positioned him to get willing help in establishing missions and to help solve conflicts between native groups and Spanish interlopers. Kino learned from the Puma Indians how to live in the desert. His friendly reputation spread over the region, resulting in growing requests to establish missions with more communities. Kino built over 20 missions among the Puma, beginning in 1687. What his fellow missionaries saw as a border between cultures and religions was a meeting ground to Kino. Friendly coexistence built on respect. Kino earned the trust of the Indians he met. Kino was an astronomer, cartographer, explorer, traveler, missionary, and the first rancher in today's Arizona. But he's fondly remembered by many Native Americans as a friend and as one who found common ground between European and Native American values. Statues of Kino are found throughout this part of America and even in the halls of the U.S. Congress. To the east in Texas, the Caddo people flourished as farmers, just as they had done during the time of the Mississippian culture. While the great mound cities of the east had been abandoned, The Caddo carried on their rich lives based on the cultivation of corn. The Caddo celebrate some of those ritual dances even today. The Caddo populated many small villages with distinctive houses and fertile fields. The Caddo achieved high levels of artistry in the making of baskets and pottery. Their homelands spanned river basins such as the Red and the Sabine rivers. The Caddo people gave a friendly welcome to Spanish missionaries when they arrived in the 1700s. Establishing missions among the Caddo was a high priority for Spanish officials since France had made inroads into Texas from Louisiana. French traders from Louisiana enjoyed friendly relations with the Caddo. One French trader translated for the Spanish missionaries. With this help, the missionaries were able to gain acceptance from the leaders of the Caddo village. The Caddo traded with the French from their community of Natchitoches, where goods were shipped on the Red River to and from New Orleans. The missions in the Caddo area helped Spain reinforce their presence and influence, but that budding relationship was shattered when smallpox raced through the population, killing many Caddo people. When the Spanish missionaries insulted their priests and told the Caddo that smallpox was the will of God, things changed. The peaceful Caddo told the missionaries to leave or die. The missionaries ran for their lives all the way back to San Antonio, where 3 missions had been established. The Caddo were armed with modern weapons thanks to French traders. The Sabine River became the border between French Louisiana and Spanish Texas. But it would be some time before Spanish missionaries would be welcome in the land of the Caddo. Today, the Rio Grande River forms the southern border of Texas. Where walls and fences stand today, migration from the south was controlled by other means in times reaching back to prehistory. Mandy Yepaw learned that her roots reach back to Comanche people. She found that people from the south were kept out of Texas by her Comanche ancestors.
And the Comanches also held, the Comanches were mostly like in Texas and in Oklahoma. And even though, before colonizers came, there was no real border there, of course, where Mexico and the U.S. is, but the Comanches held that border for a long time. The Comanches would not let the indigenous Mexican folks come up any further north.
Native American leaders are often seen holding a pipe. Agreement among council members and with leaders of other tribes were often closed with the passing of the peace pipe. The leaf being smoked in that pipe was tobacco. It grew wild in some places and was cultivated in others. A tribe in the Great Lakes region grew and traded tobacco as their main economic activity. Europeans learned about tobacco from Native Americans, and the dried leaves were brought to Europe. In very little time, a demand developed, and colonists who had come to America to find gold learned that tobacco was where the wealth was to be found. The plant grew very well in tidewater areas of Virginia, and colonists used slave labor to grow it in large amounts for export. Tobacco became part of the triangular trade, America's original sin. English colonies began expanding westward, taking land the Indians needed to sustain themselves. This land was not given up without a fight. Expansion came with resistance and warfare. The Tuscarora, the Tutelo, the Yuchi, and the Yamasee all saw colonies expand into their land. England sent convicted criminals by the tens of thousands. Native Americans wanted European goods, but the growing colonists no longer seemed to need Native Americans for their survival. An exception was the colony of Pennsylvania. Proprietor William Penn established the colony to be an oasis of religious tolerance and respect for Native people. This colony grew as well, but Penn respected the people already living here, seeking permission for use of land and paying for its use. He made treaties with the indigenous people, and he was known for keeping his word. Thus Pennsylvania held the promise of Europeans and Native Americans getting along with each other. Sadly, after William Penn's passing, his progeny sowed distrust by swindling Native Americans out of their land in an infamous action known as the Walking Purchase. Local Indians agreed that the Pennsylvanians could expand their settlement for the distance a man could walk in one day. The colonists had secretly cleared a path in the woods, and a man ran for a day, covering much more territory to be given up by the Native Americans. The end of the 1600s and the beginning of the 1700s brought rapid changes to Native Americans in eastern North America. Events in Europe had major consequences for America's indigenous people. The Iroquois were pushed out of trapping beavers in the Hudson River Valley. They expanded into the Ohio Valley to trap beavers there, but they were met there with resistance from the Miami and other tribes affiliated with the French. This was a period of upheaval. Colonists from Boston attacked Quebec from the sea. The French, under Governor Frontenac, repelled the attack and received the surrender of the Bostonians. Frontenac led French forces to the Ohio Valley to counter the Iroquois invasion. He even took part in their war dance, inspiring them to resist. After decades of attacking the French, the Iroquois League signed a peace treaty. The French had formed close relations with other tribes in the region by finding a middle ground. A culture not quite European and not quite Native American formed through the many years of the beaver trade. Both the French and their Indian allies became dependent on each other, so country marriages and the emergence of the Métis were encouraged by the church. Diets, customs, taboos, relationships, trade practices, and even languages were all negotiated, a system that transformed previous borders into a meeting ground where violence was largely avoided and cooperation was common. This brought French influence westward to the Great Plains and southward to Louisiana. It's not surprising that French explorers were the first to see the northern Rocky Mountains and the great buffalo herds on the Great Plains. While this spread French influence far and wide in North America, Nouvelle France and Louisiana never held a large population of Europeans. The King of France even sent women from Europe to help populate the continent with French subjects. English colonies, on the other hand, controlled a much smaller area but became much more populated. With the English removal of the Dutch, French and English colonists came in increased contact with each other, resulting in increased violence. Native American tribes found themselves greatly valued by their European allies. They found French, English, and Spanish colonists competing for their support. One practice was to bring Native Americans to Europe, where their presence stirred great interest. Such Indians would meet kings and queens, yet the behavior toward their people rarely changed. Native Americans were often pulled into conflicts between European powers, conflicts with origins in Europe. While the French maintained good relations with most Native Americans through respect and flexibility, their record was not perfect. At Fort Rosalie, French officials encountered the Natchez, a very different group than those they'd encountered before. The Natchez were basically the last indigenous group still in the structure of the vanished Mississippian culture, with the Great Sun as chief of a highly stratified society. French leaders insisted on building a fort on sacred ground, whereupon the settlers were attacked by the Natchez, killing hundreds of them. The French retaliated, destroying the Natchez as a powerful tribe. Further east, English colonists in the Carolinas and Georgia encroached on Indian land, resulting in attacks by the Tuscarora. Colonists assembled warriors from the Yamasee, Cherokee, and other tribes to attack the Tuscarora. All the Tuscarora warriors were either killed or captured and sold into slavery. The few survivors migrated north, where they petitioned the Iroquois mothers for membership. The Iroquois Confederacy were now known as the 6 tribes of the Iroquois. The Micmac had encountered Europeans for centuries. They had welcomed Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain, and the French farmers and fishers known as Acadians. They lived in peace with the Acadians. In 1755, the English occupied Grand Pre and other Acadian towns. They forced the Acadians to assemble in the church, where they demanded the Acadians swear loyalty to the English crown and renounce their Catholic religion. Despite being held prisoner in the church, the Acadians refused. The English forced them into boats and burned their towns. There was nothing the Micmac could do to save their neighbors. 1/3 of the population died during the Great Upheaval. The rest were homeless. Some eventually settled in Louisiana. Here they shared their new home with the Takapaw Indians. For many families separated by the expulsion, this was a place of reuniting. Since the 1713 treaty, New France built a fort on Isle Royal and named it Louisbourg. The fort stood guard over the St. Lawrence River, which protected the cities of Quebec and Montreal. Louisbourg became a major port and promoted industries such as the fishing industry. The rich harvest of cod fueled trade. New England colonists backed by the English Navy attacked Louisbourg in 1745. The French surrendered the fort only to have it returned to them 3 years later. Then it was again captured by English forces in 1758. French attempts to stop expansion of English colonists resulted in the French and Indian War in 1756. England invested heavily in this war. English soldiers attempted to defeat the French and secure their large area of influence for the English. The Iroquois declared their neutrality, but they were ultimately supportive of the English. The Micmac joined with the Abenaki people to fight for the French. They were called the Wabanaki Confederacy. The Algonquian, Lenape, the Ojibwa, Ottawa, Shawnee, and Wyandot tribes all fought for their French partners. The earliest victories belonged to the French. English General Braddock led a group of colonial militia toward the Ohio Valley to take a French fort. They were attacked by French and their Indian allies, destroying the English force and killing Braddock at Monongahela. There were plenty of grim battles between Native American allies on both sides. English settlers along the frontier were mercilessly attacked by the French and their allies, although killing of neutral Indians was carefully avoided. Some of the French victories came under General Montcalm, like the victory at Fort Oswego. Montcalm laid a siege of Fort William Henry in 1757. The English finally surrendered and were given liberal terms on condition they not fight for another 18 months. The English soldiers never got a chance to keep that promise. They were attacked by Indians allied with the French when they were 3 miles from the fort. 1,100 of the English were killed in the attack. There were numerous battles in this part of North America, but the most decisive battles came from the English Navy. With the English in control of Louisburg, their navy was able to assault Quebec. This time the English were not repulsed. Under command of James Wolfe, English troops were landed at a place we call the Plains of Abraham. The French, under Montcalm, tried to repulse the attackers using fireboats, as the English had done against the Spanish Armada almost 200 years before. It didn't work for the French. Firepower from the English ships helped the English surround the fort and win victory. Both General Montcalm and General Wolfe lost their lives in the battle. A year later, Montreal fell. The French were out of options to protect the vast American empire. Montreal resulted in French surrender to the English. In 1763, France ceded all their territory east of the Mississippi to the English in the Treaty of Paris. For Native Americans allied with the French, this action was inconceivable. How could their French allies hand to England territory that wasn't theirs? Centuries of friendship and cooperation had come to an end. They had fought for the losing side. In North America, borders changed drastically, at least in the eyes of Europeans. Measured in area, France had once dominated the North American continent. Now they lost it all. Everything east of the Mississippi River was now under control of England. The Louisiana Territory was now in the hands of Spain. England's 13 colonies were now free of threat from New France, Louisiana, and the many Native Americans allied with the French. England now had control over most of North America east of the Mississippi River. The only thing left for the English was to tax the colonists to help pay for the war.
And now we close episode 106 of Ramping Up Your English. Thanks for watching. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.